Oh, I think we're good.
I think we're good. Maybe it's
You're
just, just my hands.
Yes.
Okay, sweet. So maybe it's just the connection.
Yeah, I think it just maybe there's a lot of phones and
Yeah.
Think?
yeah.
Gotta be.
Yes.
I'll just make sure.
Thank you
I'm sorry.
guys.
Of course.
Yeah. That's the story of my life. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Lisa, how are you?
Ron.
So. We have signage in the change, which we're going to call this meeting to order. There will be no standing in the comments which we're ready to start. No standing in the back. There's availability of seating upstairs in the balcony. I'm Councilman Nicholas Narducci. We're here on Wednesday, October 19th. For this ordinance public hearing. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chairman Narducci,
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Castillo is absent. Councilwoman Harris is absent. Councilman Miller. Councilman Espinal.
Present.
You have 3 present and 2 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Sarge, do we have anybody signed in to speak for or against item number 4? So first, can I get a motion to take item number 4 out of order? Second. Motion made by Councilor Miller, second by Pro Tem Espinal. All set. Item number 4, Madam Clerk. In the committee, item number 4 is going to be taken out of order and is going to be withdrawn and continue indefinitely due to the petitioner's request. Can I have a motion to accept? Second. Motion made by Councilman Miller, seconded by Vice Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? Opposed? At this time. Thank you, Sergeant. At this time, I'd like to put item number 1. And item number 1. We have a motion to accept exhibit 1A. This time, we have item number 1 into the record.
Item number 1 is an ordinance and amendment of chapter 27 of the ordinances of the city of Providence entitled the City of Providence zoning ordinance approved November 24, 2014 as amended to change certain text in articles 2, 4, 5, 8, 9, 12, 13, 14, 16, 18, and 20.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, I have a motion to accept exhibit 1A. Seconded by Councilor Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? At this time, Bobby Azar will please come up and speak on item number 1. Steve. It's letter of testimony. Please state your name and position for the record, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Robert Azar. I'm the Deputy Director of the Department of Planning and Development. Item number 1 is an amendment that was developed by myself and our zoning officer, Alexis Thompson. This is in response to many issues that have come up during the course of administering the ordinance. This is something that we do from time to time. We submit to you.
Once again, I'm going to ask everybody to take a seat. If you can't find a seat down here, you can go upstairs to the balcony. There's plenty of seats over here. Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. So from time to time, we submit an ordinance to you that intends to amend the zoning ordinance to sort of give a fine tuning to make sure that it's working properly, that it's resulting in development that's consistent with the comprehensive plan, that it's internally consistent, and that it addresses issues that have come up during the course of administering the ordinance from day to day. Two of the changes in this ordinance are intended not only to address issues with the ordinance, but also to produce more housing, something that, as you all know, there's a dire need for in the city. For the most part, these amendments are clarifications and technical amendments. Clarifications where something is not clear or where it's ambiguous. For example, in mixed-use industrial districts, we have a new rule that speaks to how residential development is supposed to be treated. Technical amendment example would be residential zones where we allow parking lots. We never had rules around how much of the lot could be impervious, so we sort of built that out. There are two policy changes that I want to speak to very briefly. These are amendments that affect the ordinance in a more significant way, both again intended to address issues, but also intended to produce some housing. The first one involves changes to R4 multifamily zone. This is a change that is intended to deal with an issue that you have seen many times over the past several years, where developers are looking to build multifamily housing, but the only zone that fit this type of housing will be commercial zone. And so what ends up happening is there's an amendment, it has a footnote, it's kind of awkward the way you have to write it into the zoning map. And the commercial zones are not always ideal for multifamily housing. They don't have the same sorts of regulations that you see in a residential zone, like maximum lot coverage, provision for a certain amount of yard or pervious surface, enhanced tree canopy, and the like. But we're proposing an R4 district that has many of the attractive features of commercial zones. It allows for higher density, it allows for reduced parking. So we think that this is a district that will address the need for multifamily housing. It will recognize non-conforming uses that might exist in our neighborhoods. It will allow for the conversion of commercial or school buildings or church buildings to housing. We think it'll be a very flexible zone. So that's the first policy change. The second one is a change in what we call the merger. What we're proposing is to eliminate an extremely confusing regulation that is seemingly intended to reduce residential density, but in fact only creates headaches for property owners and city officials who struggle to administer it. The way this regulation works is it says that if you have two or more undersized lots that are adjacent to each other and in common ownership, anytime after October 24th of 1991, those lots are considered to be merged. Problem is, they still clear as separate lots of the assessor's tax map. There's no encumbrance on the deed. Property owners don't know that these properties are merged. They only find out when they come to building permits and they're told at the permanent desk that they don't have a buildable lot. This is not only unfair, it also is a regulation that, in my opinion, stands in the way of building housing. We already allow for housing will be built on undersized lots. They're not connected to another lot. So we really feel this is a regulation that addresses a problem that doesn't exist. We do propose one safeguard of this, which is that on lots of 2,500 square feet or less, we recommend that the building should be smaller, a little bit shorter than we would allow on larger lots. The ordinance that you have before you suggests that the maximum height should be 22 feet in these small lots. The City Plan Commission, its recommendation, which you should have, they recommend approval of this ordinance as is, but with one change. That number, 22 feet, well, by the table 4-1, they recommend changing. Sorry, they recommend changing that number of 22 feet to 30. With that, and so inclined, we would ask that you today, prior to the close of this hearing, amend that particular language in table 4-1 that says for lots of 2,500 square feet or less, the maximum height should be 32 feet as opposed to 22 feet. And other than that, again, the City Plan Commission has recommended approval of this, finding it consistent with the comprehensive plan and the purposes of the law.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions for Bobby? Hearing none, Sergeant. Do you have any way to sign up to speak on one?
Yes.
Before we take testimony, we're going to have to get that minute to the record. Council Miller.
Table 4-1, where it says maximum building height. From lots of 2,500 square feet or less, it should be 32 feet, not to exceed 2 stories, with each of the
Second. Read on the amendment, motion made by Council Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Esperanza. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Sergeant, can I have the list of item 1, please? That's it. We're going to say. We had such a crowd, we're going to be allowed to speak for 2 minutes. Once 2 minutes is up, I'll let you know. If you hear somebody already speaking basically on what you wanted to say, try to make tonight shorter. I would appreciate if you don't have any comments. Maybe that's up to you. Thank you. All right. The first person we have appointed is Senator Sam Bell. Senator, state your name for the record. And you have to.
Thank you so much, Chairman and members of the committee. And first of all, I just want to thank our planning department and this committee for undertaking the task of revising our zoning ordinance. Very important, very complex things. And on the whole, I think that this is a good revision. However, I want to raise concern with specific elements of the rezoning, which involve quite significant tightening that I think is very harmful to our housing stock. And in particular, given the housing crisis we're in, I don't think saying no to housing is not. The first one is the 2-story limit for small single families. One of the housing supply crises that we do face is the lack of availability of family-sized units. And on such a small lot, we want to have some green space. 2 stories is not enough. to build for family size. It also not allowing that sort of storage can mess with neighborhood character, mess up sight lines, and restrict availability. Now, I support the council, the CGC amendment, but while it extends the height limit, it maintains the two-story restriction, which may not be intentional. But by maintaining that two-story restriction, effectively the benefit of raising that height might be a fair compromise, is not a good. We need to make sure that 32 feet, it's still too low, but we've got to at least allow 3 stories. Now, the second one that really raises serious concerns is the massive restriction that's being proposed with sidewalks. To go from 6 feet, which is already too wide, to require a 10-foot side on it, and lots of it. We're severely restricted the availability to build to the allowed density, the ideal density of the lot line. And by yes, thank you. And by doing that, what we're doing is we're making privacy harder. We're restricting the ability to address this housing crisis, and we are also forcing people to take their backyards to have the same available space. And we're harming green space, we're harming people's enjoyment of their properties compared to the nature. So one final thing. I do also want to speak about before because it's been discharged, and I still speak on that. Thank you so much, and I appreciate all the work you guys are doing.
And I'm going to apologize ahead of time if I mess up on the last name. First, we have Teresa Azar. Just before you start, Teresa, as FYI, if anybody's coming into the chambers to speak on any items that we have not heard yet, you can still sign it. Would you please state your name and address?
Yes, my name is Teresa Azar from the law firm of Moses Ryan. And we are in opposition to this amendment, but only with regard to section 1406, which is regarding off-street loading spaces. So this amendment proposes to significantly reduce the size of off-street loading spaces. They're currently 35 feet by 12 feet with 15 feet of minimum height. And this was proposed to reduce them to 22 feet by 10 feet with only 10 feet. So the area would shrink from 420 square feet down to 220 square feet. We did submit written comments, and we also included a memo from Walker Consultants, and they analyzed the impact that the proposed reduction would have. And their findings were that many commonly used trucks on the streets of Rhode Island today would be unable to utilize the proposed loading space connections. For example, they provided that a 15-foot U-Haul truck, which has a length of 22.5 feet and a height of 10 feet, would not be able to properly load in the proposed dimensions. And that's not that large of a truck when you think of moving into residential buildings and things of that nature. Also, the 10-foot height would really cause a problem for many standard trucks. Initially, this would impact truck turning movements into streets and make turning movements significantly more difficult, which would slow operations and also create congestion in the streets. And like I said, the loading area is going to be reduced about 47%. So that will force loading activities into streets and sidewalks and parking areas, which would cause hazards for pedestrians and vehicles, and also wear and tear on our city's streets and sidewalks. The proposed dimensions aren't that much larger than a standard parking space. A standard parking space in Providence is 8.5 feet by 18 feet. This isn't that much larger. And also we looked at a comparison to nearby municipalities. And at 220 feet, we'd be smaller than a lot of them. We'd be smaller than Warwick, Pawtucket, even Boston. Their minimum loading space is 350 feet. Worcester requires 600 square feet of loading space. So we respectfully request that you not implement the proposed change to the loading space and reduce that as part of the submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next is Joe Vanderwood. Please state your name for the record.
Yes, Joel Vanderbilt, tax Department 1. I want to speak in opposition specifically to the changes in table 4-1. The elimination of the corner side setback category, the increase in minimum side setback for residential lots greater than 60 feet, and the maximum building height of 22 feet or 32 feet for small residential lot sizes. For all of these, because they reduce the ability to increase residential density. If you look at the targeted areas for growth throughout the city, downtown, Jewelry District, Valley, North Main corridor, they overlap almost completely with the flood maps established by FEMA. Because these growth areas are most vulnerable to sea level rise, the city should look for ways to absorb population increases throughout the city, not just targeted. The zoning changes would make much needed residential density throughout the city harder to accomplish. It also goes against the historic development patterns in Providence, many existing properties non-conforming, which is a sign of what you consider zoning ordinance. The city appraises the improvements made much higher than the land itself, which means restricting the amount of development and do on land is also the possible tax base. Specifically with regard to the corner lot setbacks, according to the definition section of the zoning ordinance, a front lot line of a corner lot may be any one of the lot lines of a street. It means the owner can just decide which side, which side to decide. It seems sort of arbitrary to have different rules governing two areas. If the lot fronts the public realm, it should be considered front. Also, corners are intersections and therefore the highest levels of activity. It's important for placemaking as well as for safety that the corner of the public realm is clearly defined, which is why urban designers often use the phrase holding the corner. For buildings located on corners, treating corners as if they are interior side setback would be the opposite of holding the corner. It also removes a lot of developable land from neighborhoods from a high percentage of vacant corner lots like federal.
You just wrap up in the comments.
Yep, proposed solution would be to go back to how it was. Now, on interior side setbacks, I want to talk about the Rhode Island building code, which already has side setback safety measures built in, at least up from the limits of percentage of open fire protection and sprinklers. A 10-foot side setback makes off-street parking really hard because you effectively have a driveway mandated on both sides of the lot. It makes a well-defined street wall, which is important for both placemaking and safety, really difficult. And so my proposed solution would be to eliminate the side setbacks altogether, that the building code regulates side setbacks and the other regulations that are already in the zoning ordinance, like off-street parking, max building coverage, max living space. Thank you so much.
Is it Barry Parada? Step up to the podium, state your name for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't realize I had like this type. I'm very impressed and thank you so much for allowing us to come tonight. And we're here to speak in opposition to just a section of the proposed changes to deal with off-street parking. And so very briefly, in this time, practically everything is getting delivered more and more. It seems to be quite extraordinary to think that will reduce the amount of space allowable for off-street parking. So I just we are talking about some specifics about the problem. For example, on delivery truck, which is you see all the time on the streets, it actually requires 11 feet of clearance to park. This will reduce this height from 10 to 12, from 12 to 10 feet, not allowing the vehicle to access parking. So we urge the commission, the ordinance committee, and the council not to include a reduction in the size of off-street parking spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, good job. Genie. You put a T next to it.
Otherwise, I have a neighbor who lives around the school. Express some concern over the new scoreboard. Take residential neighborhood. Consider about noise pollution, light bulbs. At the school. Just want to make sure that concern is included.
So it's like
Susan
analyze, like I see the little mic. Got it. Yep. Yep. Got it. Yep.
And have loved me a neighbor to Moses Brown School. I am here to speak out against the video scoreboards amendment.
Excuse me, can you speak into the mic?
I'm sorry.
There you go, thank you.
I am here to speak against the video scoreboards amendment. I live in very close proximity to the Moses Brown football field. They are planning to put a video scoreboard on their football field. The school is surrounded on 3 sides by residential neighborhoods. We are concerned about the amount of light that this video scoreboard will produce. In addition, last Friday night, they rented lights and held a night game. Moses Brown blasted music so loudly that we were unable to hold a conversation in our home. We know that MB is also planning to install permanent lights on their field. This, in addition to the video scoreboard, will contribute to both light and noise pollution in our neighborhood, and as a result, will greatly impact our quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron Via. Right? Thank you.
Actually, it's Ronald Viafor. Thank you very much, Chairman,
Thank you,
and
Ron.
also members of the council. I have a letter here that I would like to submit regarding 1607, the proposed eliminated scoreboard at Moses Brown. Can I,
Saj, can you grab that letter and bring it up to the clerk, please?
I'm sorry?
Saj. We'll have to mark that. Exhibit A, right? Can I have a motion to accept this as exhibit 1B? Motion made by Councilor Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? Opposed? Ayes have it. You may
Thank you.
continue.
And just again, to express our concerns about the video scoreboarding at Moses Brown due to the lightness and the brightness. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Christian Rosand. And I know I butchered that one, huh?
That's fine. Thank you for the opportunity to
Just say your
speak
name for
tonight.
the record, please.
My name is Christian Roseland.
Thank you.
I live on the east side of Providence. I'm here to speak out tonight against this changes to the zoning ordinance. We are in the middle of a housing crisis. The current cost of rent has gone up double digits over the last year, 12 to 14% to $2,200 a month, median, according to Zillow. The cost of buying a new home is now around $400,000. That's gone up 14%. What we need to be doing is we need to be making it easier to build new homes, not making it more restrictive by taking down the size and the area of the lot that you can build on. Now, if anyone's been to any European cities here, maybe Berlin, maybe Paris, maybe Amsterdam, you've seen how the homes are out to the edge of the street and how there are beautiful courtyards inside. That is good urban design. Side lots, front yards, largely usable, a waste of space, and unfortunately restricts the amount of density that we can build in this city. We need to be building more housing so that we continue to grow and thrive as a city and not forcing people out, which is what's happening right now. I would hope that our city council, instead of taking measures to restrict the availability of housing in the city, would be taking measures to address the housing crisis that is underway. Thank you.
Thank you. And after hearing some of the comments, Bob Azar would like to speak again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you to those who took the time to read this language. It sometimes is very dense and sometimes can be difficult to understand. I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, with respect to scoreboards, the regulation now is that you can have scoreboards for playing fields for schools and colleges. What you're not allowed to have is scoreboards that are video screens. You can actually have an electronic component on the scoreboard, but it's limited only to the score and the period and so forth. So the fact is that the state of the art today for playing field scoreboards is large video screens. We recognize that. We don't intend to prohibit them because we think that they can be helpful and that they can be designed and placed in a way so as not to cause harm to neighboring properties. That's why we have written the language in such a way that says that the scoreboard shall be oriented toward the field of play. With respect to the Moses Brown School, they have come in and shown the City Plan Commission a plan for their scoreboard. It is in fact oriented away from any house adjacent to the playing field, and the commission found that it was appropriately oriented. And in their opinion, it would not, even if this were to be a video screen, it would not have a negative effect on neighboring property. With respect to building height for very small lots, this is a regulation simply to ensure that for small lots that buildings are built in scale. We have, contrary to the last speaker, this ordinance will produce housing. It will produce more housing, but zoning is also an ordinance that is intended to guide the development of new development in such a way that it complements existing character. Zoning does regulate scale and mass, but it also regulates density, and we try to do all of those things at the same time. Likewise, with the setbacks, we are calling for larger setbacks for very wide lots, not because we're trying to limit the size of the houses, but we're trying to limit how close they are together in neighborhoods where the existing pattern has a little bit of relief between the houses. What this would mean is that you could potentially build a little bit deeper onto the lot. We're just trying to affect the shape of the house, not so much the size of the house. Same thing with the side yard setback. It's where the building is located on the lot. It doesn't affect the size of the building. It doesn't affect how big the building can be or how many dwelling units it can be. These are urban design standards that we have worked on through day in and day out of learning what works and what doesn't work with the ordinance. With respect to loading, the current regulations for our loading spaces are very much suburban in nature. They require an enormous amount of space in a multifamily, inside of a multifamily building to be taken up for loading very large vehicles. This is in a city where a lot of loading does in fact happen at the curb because it's an urban environment. Loading can also happen on open land within a development. We're not saying that we don't want loading spaces. We know that there needs to be loading spaces, but what we're saying is that loading spaces shouldn't be so large as to get in the way of a property being fully developed and that it not be overly large. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Bobby. That ends the public hearing on item number 1. I'm sorry, yes, item number 1. We are now going to go to item number 3. Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 3 into the record?
Item number 3 is a petition from Dylan Conley Esquire on behalf of Callis Beck and Malikov, requesting a zone change for the property located on Assessor's Plat 20, Lot 308, 26 Ringgold Street, and Assessor's Plat 28, Lot 271, 22 Ringgold Street, from R3 to C1 with restrictions as follows. Residential uses only, limited to 2-family, 3-family, or multifamily dwellings. 7 housing units shall be designated workforce housing, subject to the annual rent cap restriction set by Rhode Island Housing for 120% area medium income.
And before we start, we do have some letters to accept as Exhibit 3A. Motion? CPC letters. Motion made by Councilor Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, with that, we're going to go to the proponents first. And we have no opponents, so it'll be just proponents. First is Councilor Conley. Oh, I'm sorry. You got to step back a minute. My apologies. Mr. Barbiezar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a proposal. You heard me say this right off the bat, that we've seen a bunch of these. This is a request to change a property in a residential zone to C1 so that there can be the development of multifamily housing. The City Plan Commission has looked at this, has looked at the schematic design for multifamily housing that's proposed on the property, and has determined that this would be actually a fine candidate for the first application of the new R4 zone, if you were so inclined to approve the previous item that we just considered. They feel that this is multifamily, it doesn't have a commercial component, and that given its location between a couple of major commercial corridors, that this would be a good candidate for R4. So with that, they found that if this were to be rezoned R4, it would be appropriate with the comprehensive plan and the purposes of zoning. And by the way, if you're inclined to move in this direction, or even if you were to accept the ordinance as it is, I would recommend that any language relating to affordable housing be stricken from this. It's not appropriate as a condition of a zoning change. It's not something that we do. But if you were to stick with the C1, those footnotes about residential should certainly apply.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Councilor Conley.
Chairman, thank you. This evening, I just
state your name for the record, please.
Dylan Conley on behalf of the petitioner. What I have is a few pages of the renderings, the buildings that we would like to develop at the location. If I may approach, I can hand them in. We don't have an objection to the R4 in concept. There is a slight difference between a C1 and R4, even as the R4 is proposed to be changed, which would end in a net result of an 18% reduction in the total building size. That 18% reduction.
Councilor, hang on one second. Can I have a motion to make this Exhibit 3B, please? Motion made by Councilor Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Please continue.
So our architect has done a review of the difference between the C1, which is how the building was proposed and submitted, and the R4 proposal, which does not yet exist as law, may come into existence. And even under those circumstances, the difference is a net result of an 18% reduction in the total size of the building. That implies a reduction in unit count. So we would be amenable to an R4 designation that did not have the dimensional restrictions that impose the 18% reduction. Otherwise, the reduction in unit count may render the build unfeasible. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that is the entirety of our presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to be at ease for a second, please. My apologies, Senator Sam Bell. And again, just state your name for the record, please.
Absolutely. My name is Sam Bell. I live here in Providence at 212 Gray Street. I am here in overall support of the intent of this ordinance, but I would urge the council not to pass it as written. We absolutely need to accommodate more density to address our housing crisis. However, this ordinance raises two specific concerns the way it is currently written. By converting from an R zone to a C zone, it triggers removal of the residents' rights under the noise ordinance to only C zone resident noise ordinance rights, which means that the residents of the building will not be able to raise concerns about noise levels at the 55 decibel level until 2 a.m. And throughout the rest of the day, they'll have to be at tolerate 75 decibels.
Senator, excuse me 1 second. Sarge,
Sure.
Can I see you for a minute? Go ahead, you continue.
This is something that can be very easily fixed as a restriction applied to this rezoning. I do not think it is intentional, but it is an easy fix, and I would encourage the council to do that going forwards. Heard a lot of concern about this from my constituents. Second issue I'm concerned about is the 120% area median income restriction. I have no problem with this restriction as long as it is clarified in ironclad language that it does not trigger the preferential tax treatment under the affordable housing taxation law, which were it applied at 120% of AMI, which is very close to market rent, you'd be talking about more than $400 a month in tax exemptions at current market rents. And that is far more than the rent level is lower. It is inappropriate to apply the 8% taxation law, the affordable housing taxation law, to these units. That's why the state law does not allow the definition of affordable housing to exceed 80% AMI for rental purposes. And I want to make sure that the way this is crafted, make sure that it does not trigger that tax exemption. Because if that starts to spread like wildfire throughout the city has serious revenue problems. And I think it would be egregious to have a tax break that's larger than the degree to which rent is lowered under the AMI restriction.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Want to ask for some help on this one. There a Priscilla, maybe? Signed up for item number 3. As number 3 on item number 3. I cannot read this at all. Well, I'm going to continue. If your name wasn't called and you signed up for this particular item, let me know. Marissa Reese. Last name is Reese, R-E-I-S. We'll move on. Justin King or Ring. Justin. Is there a Justin? Justin? No? Okay. Carlos? Carlos Henrique? No? Is there a Michael? Or maybe M-A-C-A-R-E? No? Regine? No? Okay, and then again, the last one, I cannot read. And if anybody wants to see this writing, it's not, believe me, it's not us. Next to the name and address, there's not even addresses. It looks like just a bunch of scribbling that makes absolutely no sense to me. So with that being said, President Pro Tem wants to take a look. Okay. With that being said, we are going to have a motion. Councilor Miller.
I'd like to make a motion to continue this matter, continue the public hearing on this matter to our meeting on Wednesday. Madam Clerk, that's Wednesday, October 26th. At 5 o'clock.
Motion was made by Councilor Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Madam Clerk. Okay. Excuse me. Madam Clerk, will you please read item number 5 into the record?
Item number 5 is a petition from Kelly Morris Salvatore Esquire on behalf of BFG MARI LLC, requesting a zone change for the property located on Assessor's Plat 78, Lot 454, 550 BZ Street from M-MU-75 to M-1.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bobby? And Sarge, can I have the sign-in sheets, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope this is an easy one. This is the rezoning of one parcel of land from one industrial district to another. This is a parcel that right now has a self-storage facility on it. The self-storage facility was built by use variance and it does not conform to the regulations of the zone. The owners of this facility wish to expand it in a modest way, but they can't do that under the current zoning. So the request is to change this to M1. MMU and M1 are both industrial zones. They both, in the comprehensive plan, appear within the same land use designation. So it should be a relatively easy thing to make this change. City Plan Commission reviewed this and felt that it was consistent with the comprehensive plan and the purposes of zoning, and they have recommended approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Sarge, I need the signing sheets for item number 5, please. You handed me item number 4. Here you go. And while we're waiting, we're going to, I'm going to ask that there's a letter from the City Plan Commission, if we can put that in as Exhibit 5A, please.
So moved.
Motion made by Councilor Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? Any opposed? Ayes have it. Norm Cortez. Please state your name for the record, Norm, and you got 2 minutes.
Good evening, Norman Kotosh. I'm here on behalf of Merritt Hill Capital, the owners of the self-storage facility, and as Mr. Azar explained, I won't go over that, but we purchased the property a little over a year ago. The previous owners had a 20,000 square foot, 3-story building previously approved on that. We understand it was not very popular, so when we took the property over, we decided we could still provide additional storage space, but do it less intrusively. So we're going with some smaller units that are just placed on existing asphalt that are assembled on site. There won't be any major excavating. They're 1-story or less than 5,000 square feet total, so significantly reduced. So we thought we'd be good neighbors and try and do something that would be less intrusive, but yet still provide additional storage. So I thank you for your consideration and open for any questions if you have any, or no.
That's it, Norm. Thank you.
Procedurally, will there be a vote tonight? Should I stay in case any information is needed, or
No.
no votes?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Norm. Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 6 into the record? With that being said, we're going to close item number 5. Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 6 into the record?
Item number 6 is a petition from Deani Garcia Esquire requesting to amend Article 16 signs, Section 1604 illumination standards, Section 1605 prohibited signs, and Article 20, Section 2005 entitled non-conforming signs of the official zoning ordinance of the City of Providence.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bobby Azar.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this is a petition that would create a mechanism in the zoning ordinance whereby billboards that currently face interstate highways could be changed from a static message to an electronic message. This would allow these billboards to change the message much more frequently, I think as frequently as every 10 seconds. In exchange for conversion of these billboards from static to electronic message signs, the petitioners would agree to remove twice the square footage of other billboards elsewhere in the city. This is an ordinance that's come to you in a number of different fashions. It's been heard on a couple of different times. We have tried to work with the petitioners and with council staff to see if we could come up with an acceptable way that this could happen. And unfortunately, we couldn't get there. We brought this to the City Plan Commission, and they felt that the way the ordinance is currently structured does not provide enough safeguards for residential areas, and does not, they weren't convinced that this wouldn't be more distracting to drivers than existing billboards. And further, it's not clear based on the way this is written where these conversions could happen. So the results would be unpredictable. So based on that, the City Plan Commission found that this change would not be consistent with the comprehensive plan and recommended that the City Council deny the petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Before we continue, we have some letters of testimony. Can we enter them as exhibit 6A, please? Motion made by Councilor Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Espinal. And then we have a letter from the City Plan Commission. Can we enter that as exhibit 6B, please? Motion made by Councilor Miller, seconded by Council President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? Opposed? Ayes have it. We can continue. Councilor Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dylan Conley on behalf of the applicant. What I have with me today is a series of documents. This is identical to the presentation we made to the City Plan Commission. If I may, it is lengthy, but I'm happy for it to enter as a single document.
And I have motion to accept as exhibit 6C, please. Motion made by Councilor Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? Opposed? Ayes have it. Sorry, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As noted by Mr. Azar, this is a proposal that has been in front of you in many forms. It has received favorable recommendations from this committee on 2 previous occasions. Some of these statements made from the Department of Planning and by the City Plan Commission are demonstrably false. The proof of that is within your documentation. The locations of the signage is known. It's known as a result of federal law. A detailed analysis of that is contained within your package. There are exactly 2 locations in the city where it will be possible. They are on Melrose by the National Grid, on the Cranston line, and 146 where there already is an existing digital. Those are the only 2 locations. I think without going through the details, I do encourage this committee to look at that package. What we're proposing is 2 locations in the entire city which currently have billboards, which the Mass Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration have found to be perfectly safe to be converted to digitals, that there's no distinction in safety between digitals and standard billboards. Could be converted. It will require twice the square footage removals. So to the extent that you want to consider safety, you must consider the safety of the proposal of the ordinance as a whole, We're talking about double the square footage of signage being removed as a result of this proposal with no net impact or safety changes on the digitization. What you have here is a proposal to make neighborhood streets safer, to remove neighborhood signage, and to convert existing signage digital on the highway pointed away from residential zones. I've done this presentation to this board and this committee a few times now, and so I don't want to unnecessarily belabor the point. But the documentation in front of you will show that federal and state law identifies exactly 2 locations that are existing that could be digitized. This does not allow for new billboards. It does require the removal of billboards. It specifically states that the removal of billboards is a public benefit. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Counselor. Also, thank you. Linda Perry. State your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Linda Perry. I'm a Washington Park resident and chair of the Washington Park Neighborhood Association. I want to thank you, Mr. Narducci, for being here and being the chair for your extended period of time. I'm here to speak in opposition to the billboard debacle that is currently going on in Providence. This is the 3rd time that it's been before you, I believe. And I believe this is just worse than door number 1 and door number 2. Providence is the creative capital, and we have up until now restricted the digital billboards. I believe that you all have the letters that were sent to you by Scenic America, by the Providence Preservation Society, by Roger Williams Park Conservancy, by the way, is the billboard that is already electrified that they want to put up by the Elmwood Avenue exit, just past the Thurbers Avenue exit. That's by Roger Williams Park. They are emphatically opposed to that. Several people have written letters to you, and I'm assuming that you all had time to read them, and mine as well. The safety aspect of the 10 seconds that people want to like game the billboard, what's the next message? It's unsafe. It's equivalent, in my opinion, to texting while driving. It distracts. The very nature of advertising is to attract your attention. And while you're attracting your attention while you're driving, you are distracting from the act of driving. And there has been data that is on record, safety data, that speaks to this issue. I believe that in the Scenic America letter, there were references to the safety aspect. Besides the safety, it's just gaudy. And along the Thurbers Avenue corridor, it is a poorly designed stretch of road, and it's very dangerous. There's accidents there multiple times a day and week. Continue along, and then you have the Elmwood Avenue by Roger Williams Park, where you can't get over. It's really, really bad. Everybody knows that. So with that spot being a digital, it's just going to add to the issue. So in my opinion, the health and safety and welfare for public safety, I think trumps the financial gain of Lamar Advertising. No disrespect, but they're here to make money at the expense of our safety, in my opinion. So that is my opinion, and I hope that you adhere to it. And for the first time in a long time, I agree with the City Plan Commission and their assessment. I believe that, and how many times does this applicant come entitled to come back? At some point, we just have to say no, and we limit the, well, I feel that we should just eliminate all billboards and plant trees and have a different buffer zone. We should include that along the highway rather than distractions.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
And thank you for those kind words.
Mr. Chair,
Councilor Miller.
I would like to ask the solicitor if they could prepare a legal memo on this item for the committee.
Thank you, Solicitor. Thank you, Counselor. Okay, with that being said, we're going to close our item number 6. This public hearing. We're going to move on to item number 2, but I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess. I need just 5 minutes. Thank you. Give the clerk some time to get their stuff together. I'll give everybody a couple of minutes to get back into the chambers, take your seats. Sarge, can I have the sign-in sheet for this particular matter, please? Hang on, let everybody. Item number 2, do we have it? Thank you, Sergeant. Oops. Okay, again, before I have the clerk read the item into the record, again, we're going to stick to 2-minute comments. Please, if you hear somebody make a comment that basically you were going to make, instead of repeating the comments, if we could just allow that. And if there's a group of you here, if we can have one person out of your group speak, that'd be appreciated too. Thank you. Before I even start, I'm going to look and make sure we can read the names. And that if we can't read the name, at least we have an address. This one looks pretty good. All right, Madam Clerk, with that being said, would you please read item number 2 into the record?
Item number 2 is an ordinance and amendment of Chapter 27 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Providence entitled The City of Providence Zoning Ordinance approved November 24, 2014 as amended to change certain text in Article 12 and 19 regarding college student occupancy dwellings.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we begin, oh, that's 6. All right, we have one stack of testimony letters that I'd like to enter as Exhibit 2A. Motion made by Councilor Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? Opposed? Ayes have it. We also have a letter from the City Plan Commission that I'd like to enter as Exhibit 2B. Motion made by Councilor Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. Bobby Azar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I believe that there was a sub-A that might have been distributed to you that has a few added whereas clauses that hasn't come in. Okay. Well, I will present to you the City Plan Commission's letter, and then I can talk about this. I believe that I know Councilwoman Anthony has seen it and is in favor of it, but I'll start with the City Plan Commission letter.
Hang on one second. And we're going to continue. We do not have that. We cannot hear that tonight. Thank you. Bobby Azar.
Yes, sir. Okay, so this is an ordinance that would expand the regulation of college students within the city, specifically within the R1, the R1A, the R2, and the R3 zones. As you know, the zoning ordinance currently has a regulation that says that no more than 3 college students can live together in a dwelling unit, in a single-family house, in a single-family zone. This ordinance would expand that same regulation to all types of dwelling units in the R2 and the R3 zones. The City Plan Commission has reviewed this, and they had a couple of recommendations. They wanted language to be added to the institutional master plan section that says that institutions shall provide a list of properties occupied by students with the number of students residing at each address. The list shall be transmitted to the City Plan Commission and the council person of the ward where the institution is located. Next, the number of students living off campus shall be broken down by year. Institutional master plans shall include the institution's policies, procedures, and fees charged for students to avail of off-campus living, and an impact statement on the effect of students dispersing to different residences when the ordinance goes into effect. Given that, the City Plan Commission recommends that the City Council approve the proposed amendment with those changes listed above. And with respect to the sub-A that I described, if you were so inclined to accept this, I'll give this to the clerk. It has a few extra whereas statements that give a little bit more context around why this ordinance is being proposed. And then in the final section of institutional master plan, it prefaces the word students with college, so that we're using the term college students consistently throughout. And then finally, the last change is that the ordinance shall become effective not upon passage, but on May 30th of 2023, which would be the end of a typical lease period for student occupancy. I'll submit this to the clerk and you can do with it what you will.
Thank you, Bobby. Bobby, we have a question from Councilor Miller.
Thanks, Mr. Azar. Can you speak to how the current single-family ordinance is enforced?
How it's enforced, yes. Primarily, this is enforced based on complaints that are received to the Department of Planning and Development. And we have inspectors that enforce the zoning ordinance. They will go to the site, they will make contact with the occupants of the building and or the owner of the building and attempt to determine how many college students are living in the premises or are on a lease for that particular house.
Sorry, and then the remedy, then what happens?
So the remedy would be that a zoning violation, if it's found to be a violation, a citation would be issued by the Department of Inspection and Standards, and there would be an order to abate the violation.
One last question. For this ordinance, the way we are describing college students, do you understand that to be undergraduate, graduate, someone taking a class? Like, how do you understand college students to be defined?
It's the current definition of college student, which is in the ordinance. And I don't have it memorized, but my understanding or my recollection is that it's students who attend colleges or universities and commute to the college. I could grab my zoning ordinance in my bag and read it to you verbatim if you'd like. Okay.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you, Bobby. Ellen Anthony, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Anthony.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be very brief. I am the proponent of the student occupancy ordinance, and I want to thank everyone who is here tonight to speak about the student housing ordinance. I knew when I proposed the ordinance that it would cause a lot of conversation, and I am pleased to see that that's happening. We have a severe housing problem in our city and our state. We need to determine how to preserve housing for working families in our community. And we also know that we are a magnet for students who come to Providence to seek a degree at one of our world-class colleges and universities. We have already received a lot of input, ideas, and opinions, both for and against this proposal. What is clear is that we need to do something different. A lot of people are impacted by our current housing ordinance, and a lot will be impacted by any change. I'm grateful to everyone who has already sent input, and I look forward to learning more tonight from those who are here to testify. And I think it is clear that we need more time to extend the period for public input on this proposal and determine how best to amend it so that it can help preserve housing for families, help stabilize neighborhoods, and offer clear guidance to landlords and students. I am glad this issue is getting the visibility it deserves, and I hope we can all listen and learn tonight in the coming weeks to determine the best path forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Okay, we're going to start with the proponents. And first we have Nina Maka. State your name for the record and you have 2 minutes, please.
Hi, I'm Nina Markov. I'm here to testify strongly in favor of an expanded student housing ordinance. While a small subset of single-family houses are protected by the existing narrow version, there are currently no effective limits at all on how many students may occupy most homes in Providence. Thus, especially in neighborhoods near colleges, many family homes have been bought and turned into what are effectively mini dorms, housing large numbers of students, 8, 10, 15 or more students. Now, I am not anti-student. I am a mom of a college student and a college athlete, and I'm a Brown grad, and I'm also a college teacher. We are happy to share a neighborhood with smaller groups of students living in apartments and in the community, but these types of overly dense student tenements are more often than not associated with a host of problems, such as frequent, enormous, loud parties, hundreds of students at these parties, post-trash, party trash all over the neighborhood, overflowing garbage, old furniture sitting in yards, parking problems, and poor maintenance leading to deterioration of historic structures. All of these issues are very disruptive and destabilizing to neighborhoods and interfere with residents' quiet enjoyment of their homes. This sort of housing is a problem all over the city, but I'm going to talk about what has happened in my R1 college neighborhood. When I moved to my block in 2016, my neighbors were mostly families and single-family homes with some condos and apartments mixed in. As you probably know, that there are a lot of non-conforming houses in the R1 in Providence. At the time, there was one student house, a 2-decker home that was known as the hockey house, and although it was a problem at times, it was manageable. Then in 2002, 2017 or 18, a student housing developer bought 2 family homes. There happened to be non-conforming 2-family homes, and he moved to make a long story short, we now have 24 additional students living across the street in these family homes. We learned that the city wouldn't enforce the 3 unrelated people ordinance that most residents think protects their residential neighborhoods from such development. And though the houses I mentioned look like and have been used as single-family homes, they are listed in some city records as non-conforming 2-family homes, so they are not protected by the current narrow ordinance. This kind of development goes against the letter and the spirit of these rules, as well as many other ordinances that should protect neighborhoods from this kind of disruption. Rooming houses, fraternities, apartment dormitories, and intensification of non-conforming use are not permitted in residential neighborhoods, yet all the rules have some sort of loophole and cannot be used to regulate these mini dorms, we are told.
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up.
Okay, last bit. The ordinance committee. So this ordinance would not forbid landlords from renting to a reasonable number of students, but it would help prevent these homes from being turned into dense mini dorms, which undermine the quality of life for everyone in the neighborhood. So
Thank you, Nina.
I ask you to support the ordinance. Thank you.
Rick Champagne. State your name for the record, and again, you have 2 minutes, Rick.
Rick Champagne, 38 Jenks Street, Providence, Rhode Island. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and City Council members for hearing this important matter regarding the quality of life issues in our city. As a former landlord in the Elmhurst neighborhood of Providence and a current landlord in College Hill, I urge you to support this ordinance. Having lived in 2 tenement-owned rental properties in 2 neighborhoods that have bus colleges, I've seen firsthand the impact that increased student density has on year-round students who make up the living and breathing quality of our life in this fine city. This ordinance is reasonable. There is a reasonableness to having 3 undergraduate college students per dwelling unit. I believe there's a shared responsibility for both colleges and universities to provide more housing for their students and for this governing ordinance body to protect the quality of life for all residents, regardless of neighborhood or ward. We know that on-campus behavior is quite different and regulated by codes of conduct, which is quite different than off-campus behavior. When students are packed into housing in great numbers, and as we've heard, sometimes 12 to 14 people per house, side by side, totaling 24 people, nighttimes and weekends are often wrought with loud music and at times drunken behavior, leaving neighbors little recourse to live peacefully in their homes. While a partnership with colleges and universities exists to help address the issue, some who own these mini dorm properties have little interest in curbing those behaviors that impact the quality of life. Most of us are old enough to recall the movie Animal House. Some nights in our neighborhoods can be a casting call to those such movies. While both Brown and Providence College are adding hundreds of dorm rooms in the next few years, they need to do more. We also, as a city and governing body, need to act as well. We've seen similar ordinances successfully implemented in other communities who are seeking the same quality of life for all its residents. I ask that members of this council support the CPC recommendation, join the calls for help for the reasonableness of this ordinance, and see that 3 undergraduate students per dwelling is reasonable for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. All right, let's just say Michael Z. If you would state your name for the record, Mike.
So, Michael Ziegler, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I intended to sign up as an opponent of the legislation. Could I be moved to that list?
Okay, did you sign the other list?
I'm afraid I didn't.
Okay, we'll add your name to the other list.
Thank you.
And Michael, is that Z-I-E-G-L-E-R? Excuse me? Thank you. All right, then it looks like we got Chris Tompkins. Come on up, state your name for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Chris Tompkins. I live at 198 Hope Street. Been a resident of Providence for 24 years, past president of the College Hill Neighborhood Association. I'm going to highlight a couple of things you're not going to hear tonight. Unfortunately, on September 9th, 2022, in the Washington Post, there was an article highlighted states with the worst brain drain. states with the worst brain drain. Unfortunately, Rhode Island was number 48. So the reason why I start off with that negative comment is because the students are transients. They're not sticking around Rhode Island, and they're not sticking around Providence. They're not growing our city. That's not their fault. That's not the city's fault. That's just reality. In 2014, in May of 2014, the Boston Globe, headquartered 55 minutes away from here, had a multi-part series on off-campus student housing. It was done by the Spotlight Investigative Reporting Group. You can look it up online. There were some students that died in a fire off campus. That series won multiple awards for accuracy, completeness, and truth. Now, 2022, have we learned anything? No. In 2016, on Angel Street, the Brown University hockey team barely got out of it with their lives with an electrical fire caused by too many students in the building with an overload of electricity. They jumped out of the building, everybody was alive, nothing happened. You would think something would change, but unfortunately, greed overcomes everything. This is a pro-growth, pro-housing ordinance submitted by Councilwoman Anthony. Wall Street has created billions upon billions of dollars of off-campus housing funds that are being invested all over the United States. Why does not that capital come to Providence? There's one reason, because there are no controls, it's laissez-faire, you can do whatever you want, so there are no ground rules. So instead of high-quality off-campus housing that's affordable,
I'm going to ask you to wrap up your comments.
buildings are being torn apart. It's a lose-lose for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Mario Bazio. Paul, if you state your name for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Paul Medallo. I live at 29 Arnold Street.
Thank you.
And I don't have all the empirical information the last guy had. I have more of an emotional appeal. I'm a retired naval officer. I've been blessed to live in cities all around the country. My wife and I are what we call city mice. We like living in an urban environment. We ended up in Providence because there's the opportunity to live in a beautiful neighborhood, like in College Hill or on the east side, that is wonderful. And I just hope that the people in Providence realize what a treasure they have. Now, next door to me, there's this beautiful home, federal style, white picket fence, been lived in by residents, prominent residents of the cities for many years. The woman who was living there left, got bought out. They've gone in and they've chopped that house into 8 units. And it's become a dormitory. A fine, beautiful, historic home. I can't change the windows on my house. I'm right next door. I can't change the windows without the approval of the Historical Society, and it would be expensive as heck to do so. But they can tear up that house and chop it up and put 8 people in it. And since that's happened, their beautiful front, by the way, this is right on the corner, a prominent home in our neighborhood. The yard had always been kept up. It's gone to seed. Leaves are everywhere. I usually take good care of my home and I'm always paying to have the leaves removed, but if I do it tomorrow, 5 minutes later, they're gonna blow from the house next door into my yard. Trash is overflowing at that house. I want to make sure you understand something. I have nothing against the students in that house. I have nothing against the students in our neighborhood. There are multiple family student houses in our neighborhood, and part of the charm of that neighborhood, living in the shadows of Brown University, is that combination of beautiful homes, nice families, and young students. I support this ordinance because I think it's important for everyone in this room to realize what a fine neighborhood they have in Fox Point, in College Hill. Protect it. Protect it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize, before we continue, Councilman Gonzalez, did you have a question for Bob Azar? Would you approach? Would you approach the podium?
Hear my question. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. So we have severe quality of life issues in our neighborhood, and the trash, the rats, the litter, much in part due to student housing. I would say that certainly contributes to it, but I have some pointed questions for Mr. Azar here. So can you share the number of properties zoned R2 and R3 in the city of Providence?
I do have that information. I would have to get my laptop. Take me a minute.
Sure.
Let's try to get this wrapped up, guys. And out of respect, Councilman, I'm going to have to limit you to, okay?
Okay, we have run some numbers on this, and what we have is based on the tax assessor's information. I would not say it's perfect, but I'd say these are some decently decent numbers that will represent a good sense of what you're asking. In the R2 citywide, there are just about 10,000 residential buildings. That means buildings, single family, two family, three family, and multifamily in the R2 zone. In the R3 zone, just about the same amount, a little closer to 11,000.
So given that, what do you believe the implications of this policy would be citywide?
The implication meaning the number of properties that it would apply to,
and the number of students that are potentially living in these properties.
I could answer the first question, but not the second question. The first question, there are about 29,000 single family, two family, three family, and multifamily buildings in the R1, R1A, R2, and R3 zones. Now, not all of those buildings are going to be occupied by students. Not all of them are going to be desirable to be occupied by students. Typically, students live in the proximity of the colleges where they attend. So I couldn't begin to give an estimate. I would say that the number of students living off campus is knowable, but I don't have that information.
Do you have any data potentially on how the current zoning ordinance is enforced and what the implications are for that?
So I did mention that the current zoning ordinance regarding students is enforced by inspection and standards. typically in response to complaints. And I've been told by the solicitor that we have taken complaints to court, and we have it successfully collected fines from landlords who are violating the ordinance. And I would also say that that this type of ordinance does serve to a certain degree as a deterrent.
All right, thank you, Bobby. I'd like to get on with the hearing now. Thank you. Susan Skalaric. Would you please just, again, state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before you, and thank you for Councilwoman Anthony for proposing this. I'm here to speak in favor of this ordinance. I've been a resident of the East Side now. I came in 1975, and I have owned my house there for the last 40 some years. I'm an owner occupant in a legal 4-family house. So I live in 1 unit and I rent the other units. I'm also faculty at Rhode Island School of Design. And I want to say that this isn't only about students. I interact with students all the time. I have for over 40 years. I have great love and respect for the students in general. However, the reality of living where I live on a street where there are many single-family homes and where there are a number of multi-family homes, 2- and 3-family houses, most of which are student occupied. And so I just wanted to speak about the reality of living among many of those houses for the last 40 years. A number of these houses are really overpopulated, which means that if you have a 2-family house and one of the apartments is the 2nd and 3rd floor, there's usually likely to be somewhere like 8, 10, even 12 students in something like that, which means that, and given the age and the excitement, basically there's a party before they even start. Each person invites 1 or 2 friends. And so I've experienced multiple, the problems have to do with, part of it have to do mostly with trash, with parking, and mostly with noise, and mostly having to do with large parties. I've seen parties where I had to have the police come and break them up. And if I count the number of students leaving in the top 2 floors of a 2-family a few years ago, I counted 180 students coming out the door. There was another one when they emptied the house. The students were so shoulder to shoulder across the entire street for the length of about 4 or 5 houses. And it took the police another at least hour to get them to disperse. Many times the commotion outside is almost worse than the party inside, or at least as bad. It's very difficult. Over the years, I've lost many of my neighbors who have moved away. I've lost numerous tenants of mine who are always quiet and mind their own business, move away because they couldn't sleep, or they couldn't think, or they couldn't do their work inside their house. That applies to myself and my family as well. And the houses there also tend to be very close together so that the sound bounces off of them. And so it's been really a problem. It's been up and down over the 40 years that I've been there. Some years are fine. There have been years that are horrendous. There have been years that are good. You never quite know what's coming as it changes yearly, which is also one of the problems, because and something that, Brown has been also mentioned, what Brown's responsibility could be with this. The students come typically for 1 year. They don't really have an investment in the neighborhood, nor they're not staying. They're there for a year and they're there to learn and to have fun and all of that. And I can understand that.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up your comments, please.
Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to urge you to consider this and help us have a neighborhood where hopefully everyone, the numbers aren't so much, that remains some kind of consideration and awareness of the neighborhood that it exists in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Becky Menard. And if you would state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes, Becky.
Good evening. My name is Becky Menard, and I live at 26 Thayer Street. And I am not going to speak long because many of the comments I have already been made. I do want to thank Councilwoman Anthony for hosting this ordinance, and I'm speaking in favor of it. One thing that I did want to mention is the difference between the owner-occupied housing versus non-owner occupied. On one side of me, I have, there's a house in which the owner is the landlord. And on the other is the same house that Mr. Medallo spoke of, which is 8 students. Overnight was turned from a single family 4-bedroom home to an 8-room mini dorm. But with the owner-occupied home, there is somebody I can actually speak to if there's an issue. There actually haven't been issues. She rents out to individual students, which is also very different than renting to a group, a team, so to speak. But I can communicate with the landlord. On the other side with this group of new students, and they're behaving completely age appropriately. They've never managed property on their own, most likely, either rental or as an owner. And so the leaves and trash and things are things they probably haven't dealt with. But with the other side, there is, a woman who is she cares about her own house, so there is an effort to manage. But I just also want to say that we do live in a beautiful city. We take great pride in the historic nature of the buildings. And it is, unfortunate to see homes, completely changed overnight. And we want the students to be able to live in comfortable housing, but this is perhaps not the way to do it. And so we do urge the passage of this ordinance. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Sheila Craig? Would you state your name for the record?
Good evening. My name is Sheila Craig. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. I'm an owner of a 2-family house on the east side on Barn Street, and we've lived there for 23 years. And I think that I know this is a really complicated issue with housing pressures across the city. I understand that. But after 23 years of living with the level of noise that we've had to live with, and I don't think we can impress upon you how disturbing it can be. And I believe that that's an effect of having these overcrowded houses. It devolves into this party situation and groupthink, and it just takes on a life of its own. I've had times where I've had to call the police 3 times in the middle of the night because the police come and then they go away and the party starts again. I've walked out my front door to see a football player climbing across the ridge of a 3-family house at 1 o'clock in the morning. I've just recently, a house 2 houses away from me, the owner paved the entire backyard, which goes against zoning regs. It's only supposed to be half paved, half impervious. I've called the city about that. It changes the entire feel, and what they're doing is they're making it more comfortable for the probably 14 occupants of that house. It's a 2-family house, but really more of a 3-family house because of how many people are in it. It's the amount of noise coming from there, not just in the evening, but it'll be in the afternoons too. I can't be in my house. We leave our houses when the noise is that bad. That's how loud the volume gets. It's really not acceptable, and we don't know what to do about it. We're kind of at our wits' end. This year, this is happening because it's particularly bad, and it's unfortunate, and it's just like everybody else. I've known plenty of Brown students, been very friendly with them, stayed in touch with them over the years. I mean, my kids went to college and they were given directives from me to not bother their neighbors after they had to grow up listening to this noise. I mean, I had my 6-year-old daughter wake up crying in the middle of the night from the noise from 2 houses away. It's really a lot. So thank you for listening.
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Maureen Taylor. And again, if you would just state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Maureen Taylor. I live at 89 Keene Street. I have one question. How many is too many? I currently live next to a couple of houses that were single-family homes. There are 12 in each now. And then the house after that has another maybe 8 or 9. I'm not against students. I'm pro-students. I've lived in 2 student neighborhoods in Providence. Our first house, where we started our family, was in Elmhurst. We had to leave. We couldn't sell our house because the neighborhood was converting over to dormitories. The same thing is happening on the east side. These are beautiful neighborhoods. This is what tourists come to see. They walk around the neighborhoods, they look at the houses. When you have that many people living in close quarters, you have problems with trash. The trash receptacles are not enough. There are rats everywhere, including in the daytime. There's parking issues because each resident has their own car. And basically, we now find ourselves living at an extension of the university, not in a family neighborhood any longer. I am supporting the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that finishes the proponent part of it. Now we're going to go to the opponents. We're going to start off with Michael Ziegler. Mike, just state your name for the record, and you got 2 minutes.
Yes, it's Michael Ziegler. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As I said, my name is Michael Ziegler. I'm a PhD student in ancient Greek literature at Brown University. I'm also the elected political director for the Graduate Labor Organization, the labor union representing more than 1,000 graduate workers at Brown University. I'm here on their behalf today to express our opposition to this proposal. I'm here in large part because it is already very difficult for our members to find apartments that do not leave them rent burdened. In addition to limiting housing options available to our members, the passage of this ordinance would exacerbate the rising rents our members currently face by forcing a larger number of renters to compete for a stagnant pool of available housing units. I'm not unsympathetic to concerns about noise and other quality of life issues that we've heard discussed just now. However, I believe other remedies would more directly address these concerns, and that addressing them should not come at the cost of making our city even more unaffordable for working people. We need to only look to the effect of a similar ordinance recently enacted and then blocked by court order in Narragansett to understand that an acceleration of rent increases for all renters, not just students, would be a consequence of this ordinance. On behalf of the 1,000+ Brown University graduate students who call Providence home and hope to be able to continue to do so, I ask you not to advance this proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Gary. Councilor, will you please state your name for the record?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, John Garahy on behalf of Mr. Walter Brownhart. Mr. Brownhart owns several properties, several two-family, three-family, and multifamily dwellings in the R2 and R3 zone within the city of Providence. We are opposed to this ordinance. The proposed ordinance is a major and significant change to existing law and one that has not been studied in any manner to determine if the proposed ordinance will address the concern with respect to disruptive conduct. In this case, the proposed ordinance paints with a broad brush without concern for the size of the dwelling units, the number of bedrooms in a dwelling unit, or the location of dwelling units, or if in fact the limitation will solve the issue of concern. While college students are not always model citizens, the sole fact that more than 3 students live in a dwelling unit does not indicate that disruptive behavior will arise any more than if the dwelling unit is limited to 3 students. Most disruptive incidents are unrelated to the number of students living in a dwelling. Rather, it usually occurs, as we have seen, because of social media invitation. This will do nothing about that. Further, because 2, 3, and multifamily dwellings relate to investment properties as opposed to single-family dwellings, the proposed ordinance will have a direct economic impact on property owners who have relied on existing law when purchasing this property. And most of these properties are taxed at a higher rate than single-family dwellings. While not changing the zoning district, the effect of this change is to downzone the property and therefore subject to state law relating to non-conforming uses. And if the ordinance is enacted, we believe that the non-conforming sections will apply and that these uses for student living will be allowed to continue under such state law. We urge you to reject the proposed ordinance as unnecessary, adverse to the interests of many property owners, and detrimental to the housing needs of students. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Gabe Long. State your name for the record, and again, you have 2 minutes, Gabe.
I'm Gabe Long. I live on Hudson Street in the West End. Thank you for the opportunity to give testimony. I don't think the intent behind this ordinance is bad. I understand there are issues with trash and noise, but if noise and trash are the issues, let's address those directly. There's no guarantee that this ordinance will fix those problems, and I think it is guaranteed to have terrible consequences for the city. By putting a cap on the number of students who can share an apartment, you're forcing those students to spread out and take up more units, have a bigger impact on our city, not a smaller one. That's going to drive up rents at a time when we're already experiencing an absolutely brutal homelessness and housing insecurity crisis. People talk about homelessness and they often talk about drug treatment, job training, et cetera. But homelessness is a housing issue. That's it. Everything else is secondary to that. You look at cities in America with the largest populations of unhoused people, and it's basically a list of the cities in America with the highest rents. You look at historical trends and you see the same thing. There's a clear direct relationship between rising rents and rising homelessness. In 2020, the US Government Accountability Office estimated that a $100 increase in median rent was associated with a 9% increase in the estimated homelessness rate. You have a more or less fixed number of housing units in the city and a more or less fixed number of students who want to live off campus. The more you force those students to spread out, the more you increase rental demand, the higher rents go. That's based on very straightforward, very simple, widely accepted economic principles. I'm
going to ask you if you could wrap up your comments.
Sure. So to phrase that another way, I just want to say a vote in favor of this ordinance, whatever the reasoning may be, is a vote to put people on the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. Shannon Winston. State your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a broker and property manager at Renprov Realty located here in Providence. I wrote down my points tonight to try to stay on topic. As my clients and I see an abundance of flaws associated with this proposal, I wanted to just keep to a few in the interest of the time. Our agency handles all types of residential leasing, including quote unquote student student housing. I say that because we are not to discriminate against non-students and only rent to students. I think the same should hold true for all Providence rental housing. As agents and non-owner occupant property owners, we are supposed to stick to the facts of whether or not someone qualifies for an apartment based on things like source of income, rental history, and credit, not whether or not someone is seeking higher education. I am afraid this ordinance will penalize our lower income students the most. Typically, the more roommates one has, the more affordable the rent is. This is especially true looking at the average rent split between 3 students versus 4. School is expensive and so is housing, but now this proposal would just add to the burden. Renting housing off campus is also much cheaper than living on campus. Univstats.com reports that the cost for Johnson & Wales students to live on campus is $20,000 compared to just over $11,000 to live off campus. Room and board at Brown University, per the university website, is listed at around $16,000. That's almost $1,800 per month for the 9 months that they are on campus. In both of these examples, the cost is almost double to live on campus. That discrepancy will likely grow due to displacement followed by higher demand in an already squeezed housing market. Dorms often close for holidays and vacations, which once again affects the lower income students who cannot afford the trip to get back home or must stay to work their local jobs. Providence has some of the best universities in the country, and it's vital that they continue to be enjoyed by students of all economic backgrounds. This city and state has long thrived from the impact that students and universities have had on our local economy. We know that their disposable income often goes to many small locally owned businesses in places like downtown Thayer Street, Atwells Ave, Wickenden Street, and beyond. This penalty on students will not only create a ripple effect on housing availability and affordability, but on our mom and pop businesses too. We should want to be invited and inclusive city where all students can thrive. I can say among our sample of housing currently rented to students, we have very little issues and typically do not reach the point of disturbing neighbors or drawing attention from the city. I can also say with certainty that I cannot really say that about our non-student renters. I know that this is just our experience and not other housing providers may be different, but only a minority of property rented to students has become an issue for the city. We cannot let a bad few apples ruin it for the bunch by imposing harsh and questionable ordinances. Spreading out the nuisances that do exist is not solving the problem. It's exacerbating other property. It's exacerbating other problems. For that reason, and the many more voiced tonight, I hope that the committee considers the harsh impact that this ordinance will create for students and non-students alike and vote in opposition. Please vote no to the ineffective solution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shin. David Scheffler. Is it David? Schaefer? Shelfer? Okay, Linda Perry. Okay, thank you, Linda Perry. Senator Sam Bell. Again, state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes, Senator.
Thank you so much. It's the last time you'll be hearing from me tonight. Student housing is displacing people all over the district I represent, spreading throughout our city. Families, houses that were once occupied by families are now occupied by students. It's squeezing the housing supply. It's driving up rents. And it's harmful to the neighborhoods. I understand why people don't like a house that has more than 3 students in a unit. But I think what people are forgetting is that we kick those students out of those units. They don't disappear. We're not dumping them at the bottom of Narragansett Bay. They go move elsewhere. They occupy more units. They displace more people. They spread further. Neighborhoods are getting hammered. The Elmhurst neighborhood is getting hammered especially hard. Our neighborhoods cannot absorb this additional level of students that would be dumped on a very limited housing supply. It would drive up rents, it would displace people, it would increase the neighborhood harms caused by students by spreading them out further, by having more people be neighbors of them. And I also want to draw this committee's attention to the fact that the Rhode Island General Assembly passed very recently a law banning discrimination on the basis of source of income, subsequent to the Supreme Court ruling that legalized this kind of thing. It is not entirely clear where the line is when you're a student in terms of source of income. I think it's pretty clear. If you're a grad student, it's basically your job, it's your income. That means you're protected. You no more restrict the number of protected classes if you're grad students than you could of factory workers or people of color or members of the LGBTQ community. I think it's a little more unclear when we get to a student who's receiving financial aid. Does that lawful source of income qualify you as a protected class? I think that's the squishy area. If you aren't receiving financial aid and you're a student, I think you're probably not a protected class. So some students I think are pretty clearly protected, some are not. Some it's unclear. It's a genuine, difficult question legally. But I think not only does this ordinance absolutely have to address and cannot discriminate against a protected class, but we need to make sure that the existing ordinance is modified to protect those students whose source of income as a student qualifies them as a protected class. I think that's absolutely essential, and we should not be discriminating against any protected classes in our municipal ordinances.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much.
Dustin DeZobi. If you would state your name for the record, and again, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dustin DeZubi. As a lot of people attested to earlier this evening, we're in the midst of a housing crisis. There's a lot of reasons for that, but the population that's being hit the hardest is renters. This ordinance is just going to exacerbate that issue. And I wanted to speak a little bit to the impact. So what I did was I took a cross-section of the student population. There's currently more than 13,000 students that live off campus. And that's just counting Brown, RISD, Rick, Johnson Wales, and PC. I didn't have numbers yet for Bryant and CCRI, so this is going to be a underestimate of the actual problem. I took a cross-section over 1,300 students, so that's over 10% of the students that are living off campus. And I looked at where they're currently living. How many are living in 1 bedrooms? How many are living in 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, 6 bedrooms, 7 bedrooms? Then I looked at how many of those students would be displaced if they had to abide by this ordinance. So a 4-bedroom would displace 1 student. A 5-bedroom would displace 2 students, so on and so forth. Based upon the cross-section, a total of over 2,600 students would be displaced. And then I took those students and I spread them out among 1-bedroom studios, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms, because that's where they could live. And that creates a demand of nearly 1,400 new housing units that we just don't have. The anti-displacement report that looked at the new housing units over the last 10 years from, well, 2010 to 2019, noted the creation of only 2,200 new housing units. That's just about 220 new units a year. By that math, it would take over 6 years to create enough new housing units to accommodate all the displaced students. And the issue is that now we're in a macro environment that really doesn't favor development. Capital costs are high. There's not going to be new units coming on the market to the same extent that they have over the last 3 years. So
I'm going to ask you to wrap up your comments.
This is just not a student problem. It's an affordability problem for all renters across the city.
Thank you. Councilor Conley? Councilor Conley, you still here? How you doing? Stay your name for the record.
Dylan Conley, 82 Dexter Street. I just want to start tonight by saying I appreciate the concerns regarding student nuisance issues. A few folks have touched on this already. If that's what the problem is, we should address them directly. Upgrade the database and contact information for landlords, hire inspectors, increase the speed of and efficiency of enforcement. Another thing you can do is you can create passive management of these nuisances. You allow people to build apartment buildings designed to passively manage those nuisances. No outdoor common areas, no decks, larger buildings with active on-site management. But unfortunately, as drafted, the proposal will backfire and actually increase the nuisance problems it's seeking to reduce while having the unintended consequences on housing that we just discussed. So the housing crisis is largely a function of the fact that as demand for housing has increased, we have not increased supply. Student demand for housing is oftentimes on a per bedroom basis. So a 4-bedroom unit, at least 4 students can live there. This means that a 4-bedroom unit can only be occupied by 3 students if this is passed. So we displace at least 1 student. So here's the issue. That displaced student still needs an apartment. So if we walk through a brief hypothetical, you can imagine a 3-family, 4 bedrooms in each unit. That's 12 students total. If this passes, 1 student per unit is displaced. Those 3 students will then rent another 4-bedroom unit somewhere else. So on the nuisance side of the issue, this means that somewhere else will now have 3 students living to them next door where they didn't before. So the nuisance problem is spreading. On the housing side of the issue, the same number of people will consume 4 units of housing instead of 3. So that's a 25% jump in demand. The previous commenter had much more detailed analysis than I did, but every jump in demand without a corresponding increase in supply will both increase rent and displace the poorest people in the market. In terms of the value of the property, the skyrocketing demand for student apartments will make the value of 3-bedroom units skyrocket. As 3-bedroom units skyrocket, a 4-bedroom basically just becomes a premium 3-bed unit. 4 bedrooms aren't going to become any cheaper than the 3-bedroom units. So you have a higher floor on your bottom total rent cost. And again, the real kicker here is that if the problem is noise and garbage related to students living in multifamily homes, all this proposal does is increase the number of units where that problem exists. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I laud the espoused intent of the ordinance, but the proposal causes more harm than it seeks to resolve, and I see no benefit of the proposed ordinance.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Councilor Heeman? Are you still here, Nick? Ali Einhold? Excuse me. State your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ali Imholt. Thank you. Sorry. My name is Ali Imholt. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and council chairpersons for allowing me to speak today. As a former undergraduate and graduate student who lived with 4 or more roommates for affordability reasons, and as a current property manager of rental units in Providence, I'm here today to share my concerns that if this amendment passes, it will not only displace a significant number of students, as we've heard, but also put further strain on an already precarious rental market for non-students. Providence has historically been a more affordable and accessible option for all renters in relation to other larger cities in New England, for example, Boston, but this is becoming less and less so. So if this ordinance is passed and enforced, I believe it will exacerbate the affordability problem, not help solve it. I had a lot of similar comments to some other people, but my final comment is that I think it's safe to assume that college students are often the least engaged citizens when it comes to local city council matters. So in hopes of informing students from area colleges about this ordinance, I did create a public change.com petition that has now garnered over 725 signatures opposing this ordinance. Many of the college student signatories are here today to show their concerns and show their support for the opposition. So I thank you in advance for considering their situations and personal stories when deciding on this matter as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Tyler Blackburn. Guys, I'm going to ask that you hold your applause, please. Tyler Blackburn. State your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes, Tyler.
Thank you. My name is Tyler Blackburn, and I will be speaking on behalf of Andy DeMontplis and Scotty Hillgartner on the list as well to save time. I wanted to touch on 2 points: the financial burden that students will face and the security threat that students will also face if this regulation passes. Dorm housing right now costs, as stated before, roughly $1,600 to $2,000 per month, and off-campus housing can be roughly $900 per month. So this could save students annually about $10,000, roughly 22% of our semester tuition. Now to touch on the safety aspect, the zoning ordinance claims to be promoting the public health, safety, and general welfare of the community. This is contradictory to what the ordinance will actually be doing. Students will be forced to move into more dangerous areas. Not only have I had a classmates jumped, but I also have concerns for young adults, specifically younger females, that will be forced to move into these more dangerous areas. Additionally, these students will become a target for theft and other offenses, as previously stated. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Excuse me one second. You said you were speaking for a couple other people. Who are they again?
Anastasios Demopoulos and Scotty Hillgartner.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stells. Evzog. I probably really messed that one up. I'm going to ask you to state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
I'm against this ordinance. And pretty much everybody said what I have to say, except that I feel, as a landlord, I feel sort of sad that people are, quote, calling these students. I mean, they're growing up. And I feel that the neighbors who want the students to be penned in, basically in dorms or in small apartments, they are benefiting, those people are benefiting from living near Brown. Their property values go up, and they want their property values to go up more. And this ordinance would help that. And I feel that the students should be treated like citizens who are in learning, and that landlords and neighbors should help these students behave better. And I have found personally that whenever there's a party, the neighbors will call me and I will call them and they'll stop. They always stop, and they're very respectful, and they don't sometimes realize because they're young. And I don't think it's fair to pen them up, which is, I think, what you want to do to them.
Thank you. Spencer Hughes. You all set? Thank you, Spencer. Is it Tammy Burns or Tanny Burns? Come on up. State your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Good evening, Tanner Burns. The ordinance hurts the student body population because people will be forced to pay over the top rent prices while they'll only be able to live with a limited number of the people. With a limit in people and expensive prices, students will be forced back on campus. This is a major problem because if all upperclassmen live on campus, then there is a real possibility of overhousing. Just this past year, last year, on campus, Brown University was trying to have more upperclassmen live on campus. And this resulted in a lot of sophomores kind of scrambling to have a housing this year. And over the summer, they were basically tried to live off campus, and that there was no possibility of that happening. So if this was to be passed, this would just make this matter even worse than before. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Elisa Byron, 85 Keene Street. Is that you getting up there? I will try one more time. Elisa Byrne, Byrne, 85 Keenan Street. Okay. Archer, Zurich. This is why I apologized earlier on any last names, so state your name for the record, you have 2 minutes.
Archer Zurich. Good evening, council, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm a current junior at Brown University, living in a 3-level, 8-person home with 7 other young men. I feel compelled to talk to you tonight about the circumstances at Brown's University housing that have compelled me to seek off-campus housing. Each year, Brown holds a housing lottery. It is ranked based on class, and within it normally lasts about 5 days. Within the first 2 days this year, or last year rather, sorry, all of the available stock of housing was gone. So that meant that many sophomores and almost virtually no freshmen had available housing. This compelled Brown to consider turning doubles into quadruples by placing beds on top of existing beds, turning them into bunk beds. I would also like to acknowledge that I know that Brown and Brown University students have contributed to displacing particularly low income and minority populations in areas such as Fox Point. I feel as though this is a tragedy that would only be worsened by this proposal. This proposal would have an adverse effect on these communities by, again, even further depleting the housing stock within Providence. And students often at Brown who have access to more income from their parents would be able to occupy these even restricted housing apartments at the expense of the minority and low income populations. I think that this ordinance, although has good intentions, demonstrates like foolhardy policymaking. And to speak to the comments of those in favor of this ordinance, we heard mostly about homeowners and their experiences living close to university students. However, we did not hear from the populations that would be truly affected by this ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Joseph Safer Bacal. Joseph, 116 Waterman Street. Okay, thank you. Jeff Levy. You can state your name for the record, Jeff, and you have 2 minutes.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Levy, 170 Brown Street on the east side of Providence. I'm here tonight on my own behalf, but also on behalf of the American Civil Liberties Union of Rhode Island. I'm the lawyer who brought the lawsuit against the last student housing ordinance. I lost, but I'll be back if this ordinance passes. And I have some written testimony from the ACLU that I'd love to submit if the committee will take it. If not, we'll mail it in. First of all, on behalf of the ACLU, thanks. This city faces a housing crisis. We've heard that from many people tonight. And I can assure you that this ordinance will have a disproportionate impact on low-income students who can't afford to go to college if they have to pay to live with only 1 or 2 other people.
Excuse me, 1 second.
Sorry.
This will be Exhibit D. Can I have a motion to accept this as Exhibit 2C? Motion made by Councilor Miller, seconded by President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? Opposed? I'm sorry.
No, thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. Disproportionate impact on low-income college students. We've been talking a lot about the East Side and Brown students tonight, but this ordinance is going to impact students who attend Rick, who attend Johnson and Wales. And, you know, I live on the East Side, and I want to talk about that in just a minute briefly, but I do think that we need to be thinking about the city as a whole and the impact on the city as a whole. And I think that's going to be problematic. I also want to talk about, well, first of all, Councilwoman Miller asked about the definition of college student in the ordinance, and I can answer that question. It is any student enrolled at an institution of higher learning in the city, which includes graduate students, part-time students. The argument I made to the Supreme Court was about 4 nuns living together who are each taking a college class. I realize that's a far-fetched example, but there are a lot of examples like that, and I think students make great neighbors. There's an aspect of this ordinance that we haven't talked about tonight, and that's the reporting part. I don't think anybody's really talked about that, but there's some troubling aspects there too. The idea that the city would be reporting to the institutions any students who violated any city ordinance would mean that if a student goes out to protest something at the State House, protest something at City Hall, they're arrested in the protest, and then that's reported to the school. I think that's a violation of the students' rights, and I think that would be extremely problematic. And if I understand the proposed sub-A, that involves the schools reporting to the city on lists of students who are living off campus, which I think has its own problems. So the ACLU's concerns are further explained in that letter. I just want to say I've lived on College Hill for 24 years. I live on Brown Street, right in the middle of College Hill. It is a great place to live. And I love having college students as neighbors. I think the problems that we're talking about tonight, noise, litter, parking, are all things that can be addressed by enforcement of existing ordinances. I don't think that preventing college students from living in a college neighborhood in a way that preserves housing stock, rental housing stock for other people, working people in the city who need it, is how we should be addressing a problem that really is about noise and parties and things that there are already ordinances on the books to enforce. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yash Gulani. Yash. You would state your name for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Yash Gulani. Good evening. As a Brown student living in a house with 7 other roommates, I just wanted to come here and voice my concerns with this legislation. And I come here with the naivety of a first-generation college student who, for the first time, is living with more than 2 people. I just wanted to bring up the fact that the experience of living with so many different-minded, unique individuals cultivates an environment that can never be replicated. And that by depriving future college students of this opportunity, you are not only closing the gates of their mind to experiencing new experiences and new perspectives that may be brought in from their roommates, but it's also limiting their potential in a way that they would never really figure out how exactly their mind could be expanded. Additionally, multi-bedroom units allow financially burdened students to alleviate their fiscal situations by allowing them to have the power to find lower priced housing options for themselves and pick, instead of being in Brown's required housing, which is much more expensive than many of the opportunities that exist on College Hill. And I think that those are 2 big things that should be kept in mind before voting on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Luke. Luke Primus. State your name for the record, please.
Good evening. I'm Luke Primus. Proponents of this amendment have repeatedly mentioned the hockey team and other sports teams throwing parties. This false narrative aims to undermine the majority of students like myself who are not members of organizations such as sports teams constantly throwing parties and who are compliant with city guidelines regarding trash and noise. As both a resident of the state of Rhode Island, albeit not Providence, and a Brown student, this is how I see the situation. Forcing Brown students to occupy units further from campus in areas like Fox Point, which has already fallen victim to rampant gentrification since my family was there decades ago, when combined with the aforementioned negative economic impacts on local businesses as well as rent, simply must be a net negative when the proponents are simply annoyed with noise from parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a Kara? 24 Arnold Street? Kara? Joshua Friedwalk, 105 Cash Street. Oh. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Aya Josiah Fidor. I want to
look to the community as well, if that's all right. I said I want to look to the community as well, if that's all right.
Yeah, we got to hear you in the mic though, okay?
All right. So my name is Aya Josiah Fidor. I'm a former Providence.
No, excuse me, I just told you have to face.
I have to face you.
You have to face me, correct?
Okay. My name is Aya Josiah Fidor, a former Providence Redevelopment Agency board member, former member or former employee of the Providence Planning Department before I was wrongfully terminated. I've also previously served on the Providence School Board, currently serve on the Brown Community Council. I'm a Brown University alum and also hold a city planning degree as well as an MBA from MIT. Now, the reason I bring up that background is to let you know, I'm bringing a lot of perspective to my response here. And my response and feeling about this policy here is simply, in the technical term I would use, is it's idiotic. It's idiotic because it doesn't address the first problem. Many of the residents who've come here have complained about the noise violation. Again, I was a Brown student. There's nothing, and I do mean nothing, that will stop a student from partying at a house, and decreasing the amount of people in there is the least thing that's going to help to do that. The issue around students and partying is a campus-wide issue. It's an issue that's been affected by the university cracking down on Greek life and no longer allowing for spaces on campus for students to party. So that's being moved off campus. That's an issue that needs to be addressed in that way. Now, this solution, as others have identified, absolutely leads to the development of other property. But my issue is, I don't think that they're not aware that that's the case. I think the actual intention is to ensure that Brown has to develop more property. You have to speak into the mic. I think people can hear me. I think that
we have people recording that need to hear you.
Okay, well, you're interrupting me to speak. So it's very clear that the institution.
You have 1 minute.
Now you guys are watching this. So I don't need to interrupt. I don't need to show you what's very clear. And the main point I want to bring up is that there's a comprehensive plan.
Your time is up.
That the community put together. And the goal of the comprehensive.
Sarge, remove him from the chamber. Officer, remove him from the chamber. We have Martin. Martin, are you here? Come on out. Martin Pullen. That had nothing to do with the conversation. Martin, how are you, young man?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you? Thank you for staying so long this evening. So I'm here tonight to speak in opposition. I speak for myself and on behalf of Skylar Bacon, John Rhodes, and Luke Abramovitz, who are here but were not able to sign up in time. Now, all three of us are international students, and we moved here from up to 10,000 miles away. The wonderful city of Providence opened its door to us, but now this ordinance would close its doors to us. This ordinance would turn its back to us and thousands of others like us here in Providence. How should any of us afford more expensive housing? We're already faced with rising costs of living, food, and tuition. Now, Providence is a beautiful city, and we all love it. It's a city of art, food, culture, history, nature, and colleges. Brilliant colleges: Brown, RISD, Johnson & Wales, Providence College, and others. Colleges are a key part of Providence. Students, like it or not, are key contributors to this city. Don't turn your backs on us. Thank you.
Well said. Kevin Shepherd. Kevin, 385 Westminster Street. It looks like Noah, 66 John Street. State your name for the record, please.
Hi, council members. My name is Noah Glickman. I am the president of the Brown ACLU chapter, and I'm here to speak in opposition to this ordinance. I'm going to appeal to your sense of constitutional duty in this moment. On the basis of students' rights, civil rights, and community character, this is a bad ordinance. First, the ordinance itself stigmatizes the student. None of the testimony presented by the well-meaning proponents previously support a specific numerical limit on student occupancy. Rather, it seemed to support a complete and total ban on students dwelling in off-campus property. It assumes a dirtier and less conscientious character. This ordinance legally communicates to students that the city does not reciprocate the care and appreciation that they show every single day by patronizing businesses and adding vibrancy to the city's culture. Next, to reiterate some of the points made by so many of the well-spoken individuals on the opposition, this ordinance discriminates against low-income students, disproportionately students of color. Students who rely on roommates for more manageable rent will be forced to pay 2-3 times that current amount, settle for substandard housing in an already saturated housing market, or choose an entirely different city to pursue their education. Finally, and perhaps most fundamentally, this ordinance does not accomplish the goal it purports to pursue, preserving the quote, stability and character of residential neighborhoods. Students will spread out from necessity, take up more space in more buildings, exacerbating the city's housing crisis and exacerbating the very problem that this ordinance claims to address. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian Roseland. Christian Roseland, 842 Hope Street. Matthew Pelling. State your name for the record, please, Matthew.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Schelling. I am a resident here of Providence, here on the east side. My wife and I are in our late 20s. We're renters. We've been married for 3 years, hoping to start a family sometime. Really love the city. Moved here because of how beautiful and walkable, and love the Greek Streets plan and all that kind of stuff. She owns a printmaking business. I'm an education researcher. So one of the previous speakers in support mentioned the brain drain here, but you know, there are many of us who are, you know, educated and happy to be contributing to the community that are here. As I said, we rent a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side. And so I'm primarily concerned, as has been articulated before, that this ordinance will dramatically increase demand for these multifamily units, like the ones that I rent, without changing the supply. And therefore it will increase the rent prices that we pay and displace working families like ourselves who are young and, you know, trying to get our footing here. And which, as I understood, was one of the motivations for and purposes of this ordinance. As has been stated, we're in a housing affordability crisis. Providence rents have increased by 23% in the past year, 5th highest of any city in the US, and the fastest out of any city that's not in the Sun Belt. If houses are overcrowded, we should allow an increase in supply. So I'd exhort the council to consider more ordinances that result in increasing supply rather than increasing demand. If houses are overcrowded, we should allow conversions, you know, convert a large single family home that houses a lot of students into a triple decker or something like that, and increase the supply of housing so we can have an abundant city for all residents. Thank you for consideration.
Thank you. Matthias Mayer. Hiya. State your name for the record, please, young man.
Good evening. I'm Matthias Meyer. I'm a sophomore at Brown University, and I just like to say that I oppose this ordinance for all the reasons outlined by my friends and the attendees. I can only speak on behalf of College Hill, but I think it's important to remember that Brown University has been operating in this neighborhood for almost 260 years. Most of the residents that are in favor of this ordinance know that it has been a part of College Hill this whole time, and that entails student residents living in this neighborhood. To try and pass this ordinance would, in effect, constitute a radical change in this neighborhood's character, and feels a bit bizarre given the outsized role that students have played in this neighborhood and in the rest of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Luke Abawansit. How about Luke, 69 Brown Street? No? Hey, how about Brian Bishop? How you doing, Brian? You please state your name for the record.
They say, I meant fine, Mr. Chairman, sorry. Brian Bishop, was born I was born at Lying In, so that's not the east side, but I was brought up on the east side. So I've watched this tension my entire life as a campus brat. I'm quite well aware that there are some quality of life issues that are associated with Brown. I'm also aware that Providence is blessed both to have schools like Brown, PC, and Johnson and Wales downtown. And something like this, I think, requires not a preservation of the status quo at the expense of allowing these schools to grow while they still maintain their history as neighborhood schools. And in a way, I'm sorry to say that I grew up in a neighborhood and still work there and know the character of the neighborhood is one that tends to try and solve problems by opposing change. Now, you could hardly characterize me as a progressive, but I think that I saw this neighborhood come out and oppose what's known as the Gilbane project, or the first effectively private dormitory on Thayer Street. Ultimately, the result of that was a smaller building. So less students are housed nearer to campus because of neighborhood opposition. Now, look, there can be two things. There could have been a reason to not want that building to be quite that tall or to have that effect, but the neighborhood came out for that. The neighborhood came out to oppose Brown's new dormitories, which will house some 500 people. I mean, you can't have it both ways. We can't have the kind of vitality that Brown provides here. One kind of change that the East Side also opposes is any idea that the homestead exemption might not apply the entire value of the house. Maybe it should only apply to what a first-time house buyer could afford. Well, I don't see very many people on the East Side favoring that change. Meanwhile, we who own and operate buildings here in Providence pay millions of dollars in taxes. That so-called college dormitory pays $1 million a year in taxes. My family pays millions, has paid millions of dollars to the city of Providence in the last 20 years. And I'm on the front lines of the human resource dealing with college kids. I'm not here to say there's no such thing as a quality of life issue with college students. I don't like the phone to ring at night when there are problems, but that's why I'm there. And I think we have to consider the taxes and that the investment in these communities is actually made by people that invest and own those buildings. Not everybody, certainly not myself, and many of the people I know and work with are kind of absentee to what goes on there, and devil may care that the neighborhood is being disturbed. So I understand there are these, but we had a compromise on this 10 years ago where this was applied in what were understood to be family neighborhoods with the R1. I don't know that people really checked the zoning or thought about R2, and I understand there's been some change. But what we can do is positively enable a zoning to build more housing near the campus and more units, rather than trying to spread the problem out and have a kind of
I'm going to ask that you wrap up
poor
your
solution.
comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Casper Shireman. Casper, again, if you would state your name for the record, please.
Hi, Casper Schliemann. And I know we've been here a while, so I'll keep mine short and sweet, but I'm vehemently opposed to this, this change due to all the reasons that my fellow students and fellow individuals have stated: housing, rising cost of living, increased rent, pushing students farther away from campus and all that. But I'll just end with this: how incredibly saddened I am to see such an anti-student proposal come from a city with such a large and vibrant student culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Flynn. Paul Flynn. Well, if you would state your name for the record.
My name is Paul Flynn. I moved to the city of Providence in 2004. I moved to Carrington Avenue in a dwelling with 3 other students on 1 floor, so that's a unit. It would be illegal. I checked the zoning, it's zone 3. A couple years later, I moved to a residence on Preston Street and was no longer in violation of the proposed ordinance. What changed? My wife moved up from Texas. We could afford to live together. I didn't have to live with other people. This is about money. It will disproportionately affect people who are living with other students simply because they need to pay the rent. People don't live with people they aren't related to for kicks. So look, if the city wants to improve the housing stock situation, it can allow for the building of dorms like on Brook Street. But that dorm is smaller than it could be because of community input. My message to the council is if they want to consider improving, adjusting this ordinance in response to input, as Councilwoman Anthony stated, they should repeal it. Providence is a vibrant city. Providence is a busy city. Providence is a noisy city. There is nothing like it in the state of Rhode Island. If people feel that it is too noisy for them, I have 3 words: move to Cranston. And if that sounds hostile, I ask you to consider that is the message that the city council would be sending to students by adopting this ordinance. Get out of town. That is the wrong message to send. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Yanni, just state your name for the record. Excuse me.
Hello, my name is Yoni Shore. Thank you for taking the time today. I'm also strongly opposed to this proposal for a number of reasons that my fellow classmates and everyone else already stated, but I think there's also 2 other big reasons that have not been given enough attention. The first is the fact that Brown as well as Providence are extremely diverse in the cultures and religions that they represent in their student body and population. I myself am an Israeli Jew, and I have many Muslim friends and Southeast Asian friends who, in order to practice their culture and religion accurately and safely, they need to live off campus, lighting candles, different rituals and other things that don't allow them to do that in a dorm. So to take that right away from them by raising these prices and making that less accessible would be very foul and very harmful to the diverse population at Brown and beyond. Also, I think that reducing the number of kids in a house from 10 to 3, that doesn't stop them from hosting parties. I think it's still very possible to host a party in a 3-person house. It actually gives them more room. Now with 3 people in each house, there's more houses that are gonna be throwing parties around the city. I think that if you reduce the number of people in a house, it's also gonna potentially make them feel more isolated and less social throughout the week to encourage more parties and bigger parties. So it could actually have a reverse effect. And so for all those reasons, I'm definitely against this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Preston Keller. You would state your name for the record.
My name is Preston Kelleher. I oppose this ordinance for all the reasons that people have said before me. And mainly the people who support the ordinance are the residential neighbors, and they live near students and don't want the students to live next to them. And as someone said before me, Brown has been operating in College Hill for 258 years. And those neighbors who support the ordinance, they moved into College Hill in the heart of Brown's campus, knowing full well that it's in fact a college town. And Brown University students have lived in residential areas near the campus since its inception. So that's 258 years this has been going on. And these neighbors who deliberately chose to live in a college town now want the school and its off-campus housing radically changed around them. With the increase in crime in Providence, having students live further away from campus presents grave safety concerns for parents, students, and the school itself. If this ordinance passes and students are relegated to finding housing far away from the campus, it will have a detrimental effect on all the local businesses, Thayer Street restaurants, and other businesses that rely on the foot traffic of students on a daily basis. In addition, with this ordinance, Brown University would now be required to report to the city of Providence exactly how many students are living off campus and presumably exactly where they live. This is a severe privacy issue, and one big concern would be, how is this information handled? Also, what guarantees could be provided that the information is going to be secure and confidential for everyone's privacy? And God forbid that this housing information falls into the wrong hands and someone now knows exactly where each and every single student at Brown lives and how many people live with them. So this would be a monumental concern for female students who live together and other people. And then also
Your comments.
what? Yeah. And how comfortable would parents be with the fact that someone out there knows exactly where their child lives? Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan Kearns. Brendan Kearns. Camilla Provenzano. Did I just call you, young man? And you are Brandon? You have to state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Brendan Kearns, and thank you for having me. This is about the ordinance of the real estate and the residential. Brown University does not have enough housing to support the student body as is. This ordinance passes, so severely diminish the inventory of off-campus housing units, forcing students to live further away from campus. Not only does this present a grave safety concern, but it also is an incredible inconvenience for students to have obtained transportation to classes for each day, because most of the kids walk to school because they're within distances. When students live or choose to live close together in larger units, it's simply a financial decision. It's a lot cheaper. By living together in larger units, the students can expect to pay $1,000 or less per person. But according to Zumper, the largest privately owned retail or rental platform in North America, the average price of a one-bedroom unit in College Hill is around $1,600 a month. By passing this ordinance, it would inflict a unique financial burden on the student body, relegating them to pay automatically more money in rent each year, on top of a soaring tuition price of $83,000 a year. Given the inflation and all the rising tuition costs that each student and family have to contend with, last thing they need us to pay substantially more each year. By substantially reducing the number of 4 and 5 bedroom units for off-campus housing, landlords who do not own property in R1, R2, R3 zones will certainly increase the rental price of these units because the housings are going to go down, which makes it entirely unaffordable for these students. If there are now only 20 units available that can house 4 or 5 students instead of 80, the price of these units will drastically go up. Additionally, students who have a scholarship come from low-income households and minority families will bear the brunt of this pain. If a student from a low-income household can only afford to pay $900 a month in rent, how are they supposed to pay these ordinances if it passes?
You wrap up your comment, please.
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Camille? Are you Camille? My name is, state your name for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Camilla Provenzano. Sorry. So sorry about that. So sorry, so sorry. Okay. I'm kind of lost.
Do you
Sorry.
need a moment? I can call the next
Say,
speaker
can
up.
I just have one moment, please? I am so sorry
Okay.
about this.
Next speaker will be Alex. Looks like Alex Jordan. Come on up, Alex. State your name for the record, please.
I'm Alex Jordan. Thanks for having me this evening. So I'm currently a 5th-year PhD candidate at Brown University. I'm currently training to be an immunologist. I study ways in which we can use our immune system to better fight cancer. In addition to my resume that I just laid before you, I'm a historically underrepresented college student. I'm a first-generation college student raised by a single mother and come from a very low income family. And so throughout the course of my college career, whether it was an undergraduate at a public institution or here at this fancy bubble that we call Brown, I have had to, out of necessity, live with other people. That allowed me to continue my education to get to the point where I am today. I think that restricting the number of students that can live in a house, regardless of how many bedrooms are in the house, is targeted at students and does not actually address density issues. Like I said, I'm a college student. I have all that experience, 10 years of work experience as well, a small 401k from that experience. And I hope to be able to afford a house in Providence one day. But you know, currently I can't do that. So I have to live with roommates. On the other side, there are some undergraduates who spoke today who may have access to things like their parents' credit cards or other financial resources because Brown is historically a privileged university. I cannot compete with the kids that I teach when it comes to financial resources, finding housing, and so on and so forth. I teach some students who have shoes that cost more than my rent. And despite the fact that those students may be partying in the neighborhoods, I think that the contributions that I can make to the community and have made in my time here in Providence, as well as my colleagues here at Brown University, even including the partying undergrads, I think that restricting it in this way just makes very little sense. I think there are many other propositions that have been given today from dissidents of this proposal that make a lot more sense and are less broad in their impact on the community. And I think that they should be considered. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Are you ready, young lady? State your name for the record.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
My name is Kamea Provenzano. If a landlord now have to rent a 4-bedroom unit to 3 students, do not expect the same price for the unit change. Landlords will continue to rent these units for the same price, foreclosing the student body to pay an outrageous amounts of money to live off campus. Since the city budget relies on real estate taxes and landlords are not in a position to lower the rent to still pay the massive property tax, the ordinance only seeks to punish the student body. Not only can they not live with their friends, but they will have to pay excessive amounts of money to even live off campus if they can afford to. Property values throughout Providence will surely deteriorate as a result of this ordinance. For example, if you own a 2-family that has to be renting to 2 groups of 5 students for 4 years, now only 6 students can live in that entire house. How are they possibly supposed to pay the high property taxes, mortgages, if their ability to rent the building has been diminished? This will lead to foreclosures of real estate markets throughout Providence for years to come. Also, this will certainly impact the city's budget since they rely on property taxes. And as a college student, it's hard enough as it is to get financial aid to be able to live on campus from a family who does not come from money. So it's hard enough for us to pay as it is to even go to school. So now having to figure this out amongst these regulations, it's going to make it a little harder for us students who aren't financially gifted from our parents. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Last speaker is Edward Kazarian. Do you have a question? Can you please stand? I guess I can allow that after he speaks? And if you would state your name for the record, I'm only doing that because I'm a nice guy.
Edward Kazarian, good evening, everyone. I just want to say for the past 42 years, I've been renting out to Brown, RISD, and Johnson and Wales students. I've had almost 3,000 students come through our properties. I can say almost 100% of those students have been respectful and responsible. As far as trash and noise concerns go, there's ordinances already in place if people have disorderly trash or if they're noisy. But on the rare occasion that there has been a gathering of more than 10 or 15 people, that I've been alerted to, these students have immediately dispersed respectfully, and this has been very rare. I can think of 2 occasions in the past 4 decades since I was 20 years old, where there's been any kind of activity that involved me having to go down there. And again, it was a very, very small number of people that were just talking outside loudly, but no kind of issue where, neighbors have been disturbed. I would just say that on behalf of a lot of the students that spoke tonight from economical concerns, one of the things that having more than 3 students living together provides is affordable housing for these students. You heard of the student, a few speakers before me, stress how important it was for him to be able to continue his education by being able to afford housing so he could, and by living with other people, more than 3 people, he was able to do that. So I just like to say that I think the students that are in our city are a huge asset to all of us. And we're grateful for them and for what they provide. And I don't think punishing them because of a few or however many concerns there are about trash or noise, which have already been addressed by the ordinances that are in place here in the city. Again, thank you.
Thank you. Saj, can I have that list, please? Well said. Saj? Stephen, come on up. State your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, council members. My name is Stephen Ferrandi. And what I'd like to say is
Sorry about that.
I'm sorry. Well, I can wait till he's ready. Okay. I'd like to thank the council and applaud this council for basically understanding what is needed in their town to save their city. Because this is what is needed in this town to at least help alleviate what's happening in the city, as well as in many other cities that have college towns. I agree with expanding into the other zones, and I also agree with you taking the fortitude several years ago to put an institute, the 3 college student ordinance, and having the fortitude to take it to court and have the legal advice to win in that court, and finding that you have a constitutionally vetted Supreme Court ordinance that has been challenged and overturned, and you have won on that. This is going to try to bring it into some of these other neighborhoods. All it's going to do is bring back some balance in your neighborhoods. I mean, there are no rules right now. In Narragansett, the same issue is happening. College students, 6 here, 6 there. There's mini dormitories all over the place. It's going to help with the affordable housing that you need. There's a lot of money that the landlords are not going to stop because of the lucrative money involved in this. And all this is asking for is to peacefully coexist with a reasonable amount of college students in these zones. It doesn't say it doesn't limit renting. It doesn't say it stops people from renting. It's just trying to keep a limited amount so we can peacefully coexist. And like I said, it's a Supreme Court vetted ordinance. In Narragansett, there's been a political pact formed. Now, little old Narragansett, the beautiful place down by the sea, we have a political pact that was formed recently of a landlord group where about 75% of the money involved were from out-of-state landlords. They have endorsed 5 candidates or on their signs that I guess they feel that they're pro-landlord. And they have also signed up 300 to 400 college students just late in the game here. So, this isn't going to go away. So, and I just want to, it's imperative that you've been a leader on this. Narragansett, we're trying to make the second ordinance that we passed, the same exact U1 hold, because evidently we don't have the expertise. We've lost one time on a technicality, and we're staring down another barrel of getting that decision
ask that you-
any time now. So I appreciate all of it. And the landlord story is the same time. I was at the council meeting several weeks ago in Narragansett. It's the same story. We're going to lose money. It's all about the money. So please try to do the right thing. Stand forward with it and make it happen. It's going to be beneficial for your beautiful city.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, with that being said, that was the final testimony on this particular item. We do have a motion.
Yeah,
Councilor Miller.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I just want to thank everyone for hanging in tonight also and testifying, but I'd like to make a motion as the sponsor requested at the beginning that we hold this hearing open until November 16th.
To continue
At 5 PM.
At 5 PM. Second. Okay, motion was made by Councilor Miller. Motion was seconded by Council President Pro Tem Espinal. All in favor? All opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, everybody, for coming, especially thank you to my clerks and my colleagues in Babiesa. And that ends this public hearing. Thank you.